7 brutal truths you need to hear before you turn 30. On a cold bathroom floor, a father clutches his son, tears of regret in his eyes. Yet tomorrow he will rise to fight again. That haunting image from The Pursuit of Happyness isn't just a movie scene, it's a mirror. By the time we near 30, many of us have fought daily battles between hope and despair, just like that father. And as we fight, life quietly teaches us lessons, often the hard way. There probably isn't one person alive over 30 who doesn't carry at least one major regret. But you don't have to wait for regrets to learn these lessons. Today, we're digging into 7 brutal truths you need to hear before you turn 30. Each truth comes with a story, a bit of philosophy, and a slice of modern reality, from social media illusions to hustle culture burnout. These aren't comfortable truths. In fact, they can be downright painful. But internalize them now, and they just might save you from that silent heartbreak later on. Let's dive in with open hearts and eyes wide open.
Truth number 1. No one is coming to save you. It's on you. Imagine you're 25, drowning in responsibilities and debt, waiting for a lifeline. Maybe you think a dream job will appear, or a partner will magically understand your pain, or your parents will fix everything. That rescue never comes. I recall a friend, let's call him Jake, who spent years in a job he hated, hoping his boss would notice his misery and reduce his workload. Instead, Jake's phone buzzed at 11 p.m. one night, another demand from work. He stared at the screen, exhausted and angry, and it finally hit him. No one was going to step in and draw the line for him. He had to do it himself. Jake quit the next week. It wasn't easy. He had no hero to swoop in with a new job or a pile of cash. But in that difficult choice, he found power. The truth is, life isn't a movie where a mentor or savior walks in at the perfect moment. It's more like a rough ocean and you're in a lifeboat. You can wait and wish for a ship to find you, or you can start rowing. This truth is harsh but liberating. You are responsible for your own life and outcomes. As one writer put it bluntly, nobody is coming to save you. You have to learn to save yourself. At first, that sounds lonely. We want to believe that if we suffer or struggle long enough, someone or something will make it right. But reality often falls short of our hopeful expectations. Promises get broken, help isn't guaranteed, and even the people who care about us have their own battles to fight. Does accepting this mean we shut everyone out or never ask for help? Not at all. It means recognizing the limits of others. Friends, family, mentors, they can support and lift you at times, but your life's steering wheel stays in your hands. If you leave your fate entirely to others, waiting for a spouse to magically make you happy or a boss to reward your hard work, you might end up bitterly disappointed. At the end of the day, you are the one who must take action to change your situation. In today's world, it's easy to fall into the trap of waiting. We scroll through social media and see someone seemingly saved by a new relationship or inspired by a motivational post. We might secretly hope that a self-help guru's next video will fix our motivation, or that the next app, the next big move, the next election, something will rescue us from our problems. But a motivational quote on Instagram won't drag you out of bed for that morning run. An inspiring movie, as powerful as it feels, won't magically erase your credit card debt or heal your mental health. You have to do the work. You have to be the hero you've been waiting for. This doesn't mean you never lean on others. Human connection and support are invaluable. It means you don't abandon the driver's seat of your life. Think of it this way. If life is an ocean, others can help patch your boat or share their compass, but you must sail it. Once you accept that no one is coming to save you, there's a certain freedom in it. No one can take power away from you once you claim full responsibility. Jake, in our story, found that freedom. By quitting that job and forging his own path, he stopped waiting for someone else to set him free. He set himself free. This truth can be a tough pill to swallow, especially when we feel weak or overwhelmed. It's normal to crave a savior when life gets hard. But internalize this: you are the hero of your own story. When you fully accept that it's on you, you also accept that you have the power to change things. That realization is like an ignition switch for your resolve. So ask yourself honestly, are you waiting for someone or something to fix your life? If yes, how long will you wait? The ladder is there, but you have to climb it. And the amazing thing is, once you start climbing, you'll find others willing to cheer you on or steady the ladder, but only because you made the first move. No one is coming to save you, and that's okay. It means you can save yourself, starting now. And once you realize it's on you, the very next question becomes, what are you doing with what you control? And nothing is more under your control or more quietly slipping through your fingers than your time.
Truth number 2. Time is your most precious currency, and it's running out. Meet Sophia. At 23, Sophia always said, "I have time." She scrolled for hours through TikToks, binged entire seasons of shows in a weekend, and pushed her dreams off to someday. She wanted to start a small online business, she dreamed of traveling, she meant to reconnect with her high school friend who moved away, but there was always tomorrow. Fast forward, Sophia is 29. One day she opens her Facebook and sees an old post from her 23-year-old self excited about that business idea. It hits her like a train. She never started it. The friends she lost touch with? They haven't spoken in 6 years. The places she wanted to see? Still on a bucket list. Sophia feels a knot of regret. Where did all that time go? In her mind, she runs a montage of countless evenings scrolling through other people's lives, clicking next episode endlessly and refreshing feeds for a dopamine hit. All those tiny choices seemed harmless. Relaxation, a way to cope with stress, but they accumulated into years. The realization leaves her in tears. She traded her time for nothing in return. The brutal truth is that every second you waste is gone forever. Time is a currency you can never earn back. We often fail to treat it with the same respect we give to money or other resources. Think about it. If you saw someone literally burning cash, you'd call them crazy. Yet how often do we burn hours on things that don't matter and think nothing of it? As the Stoic philosopher Seneca observed, life is plenty long if we use our time well, but we waste so much of it and then complain that life is short. We live as if we have infinite time, procrastinating on our goals and neglecting moments with those we love as if there will always be more. The truth hits hard when you realize the amount of time you get is uncertain, and once spent, it's irretrievable. When time is spent without care, it becomes a persistent source of regret. How many times have you caught yourself, like Sophia, lost in the black hole of the internet or doing something meaningless, only to later sigh and wish you'd done something else? Those little pangs of regret are telling you something. Your time matters. Our modern lives are practically designed to steal time in tiny increments. Social media apps, for example, are engineered to keep us hooked, feeding us an endless scroll of content. Before you know it, a quick 5-minute glance turns into an hour. Studies have found that this constant online time sink not only drains hours, but also leaves us feeling empty and anxious. We have so many tools to save time: productivity apps, faster communication, instant everything. Yet somehow we feel more rushed and busier than ever. Paradoxically, being busy can be a form of wasting time if our busyness is filled with things that aren't truly important to us. We schedule back-to-back meetings or errands, or say yes to events we don't care about, and our days become cluttered with obligations that don't fulfill us. Meanwhile, things that truly matter, like calling your parents, playing with your dog, pursuing that passion project, or just resting, get pushed aside. By 30, you start noticing how fast the 20s flew by. You might see peers hitting milestones and wonder if you're behind, or you might simply realize you can't recall where the last decade went. It's sobering. In the age of endless digital distractions and hustle culture, guarding your time becomes both harder and more crucial. Time is the great equalizer. Whether you're rich or poor, everyone gets 24 hours in a day. But the brutal truth is you never know how many days you have in total, and you can't get back those you've wasted. This isn't meant to scare you into thinking you must be working or, quote, productive every minute. Joy and relaxation are important uses of time too. The key is to be intentional. Wasting time, truly wasting it, means spending it on things that neither give you meaning nor joy.
Next time you catch yourself endlessly scrolling or sinking time into a toxic relationship or a soul-sucking pursuit, remember Sophia's wake-up call. Picture every hour as $100 and ask, would I spend this $100 on another hour of doing this? If not, maybe spend your time in a way that you won't regret. Call that friend. Work on that idea, even if it's scary. Go for that morning jog. Say no to that event you're not interested in so you can read a book or sleep early. None of us will use every second wisely. We're human, but we can waste far less. As one famous quote attributed to Darwin goes, "A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life." The clock is ticking silently every day. Value your time, fill it with what counts, and your life will feel fuller. Because in the end, the time you have is your life. Don't burn it unwittingly. Choose how you spend it before it spends itself. And here's where it gets even tougher. Even when you do take responsibility and use your time wisely, the world still doesn't always reward you, which leads to the next brutal truth many of us don't want to face.
Truth number 3. Life isn't fair. Learn to accept and adapt. Growing up, we're often told that if we play by the rules, things will work out. Study hard and you'll get into a good college. Be kind and people will treat you kindly. Work diligently and you'll be rewarded. By 30, reality may have smacked you a few times with a different message. Life doesn't always give you what you deserve. I remember my friend Priya in her late 20s. She did everything right, got a degree in a field she was passionate about, poured her heart into her first job, always went the extra mile. Meanwhile, another acquaintance coasted, doing the bare minimum. Yet during a round of layoffs, Priya lost her job while the coaster kept his. She was devastated and angry. It felt deeply unfair. And it was. In another corner of life, a guy I know fell head over heels for a close friend of his. He treated her with respect for years, always there to help, thinking that eventually she'd see he was worthy of her love. She ended up dating someone else, someone who, in his eyes, hadn't earned it. He was left heartbroken, asking, "Why not me, after all I did?" These moments can breed bitterness. We think life is like a vending machine. Put in good deeds, get good outcomes. But sometimes you put in your coins and get nothing, or worse, it spits out injustice. The brutal truth is that reality is indifferent to how deserving we think we are. Life isn't fair, and it never promised to be. As bluntly noted by one writer, you can study hard and still fail the exam. You can work hard and not get the promotion. You can love someone deeply and they may never love you back. None of this means you should stop studying, stop working hard, or stop loving. It means you shouldn't do these things expecting that the universe owes you a particular result. The problem isn't that life is unfair, it's your broken idea of fairness, one observer wisely said. Ouch. But think about that. We often assume a moral order to the world that guarantees us particular outcomes. I did X, so I should get Y. When we don't get what we expect, we feel wronged. It's as if each of us secretly holds a contract that life never actually signed. Accepting that life isn't fair is not about becoming cynical or passive. It's about adjusting our internal script. Instead of, if I do good, I deserve good, try, I will do good because it's who I choose to be, while knowing the outcome is never guaranteed. This mental shift can protect you from crushing disappointment and victimhood. It's a form of resilience. In the age of social media, unfairness can seem magnified. You might slog at a craft or a business for years with little recognition, then open Instagram or YouTube and see a teenager become a millionaire celebrity overnight doing silly dances or unboxing gadgets. It's easy to scream, "That's not fair." Why does that influencer get fame and not you, the more deserving person? The truth is, viral success often comes down to luck and timing. In other words, randomness. The internet shows us countless comparisons that make us feel the world is arbitrary. People younger than you achieving things you yearn for, people who seem to break rules facing no consequences, and people who cheat or lie still coming on top. It's tempting to become disillusioned. But here's the flip side. Understanding life's unfairness can also breed compassion.
Everyone gets their share of undeserved pain, just in different forms. Some of the seemingly luckiest people fight invisible battles: chronic illness, family trauma, mental health struggles that aren't apparent on the surface. While one person envies another's career success, that successful person might envy the first one's loving relationship or health. No one escapes the impartiality of life. The modern world, with its curated feeds, often hides this, so we must remind ourselves not to measure fairness by snapshots of others' lives. Accepting that life isn't fair doesn't mean we shrug at injustice or stop striving to make the world better. Far from it. We should fight unfairness where we can, stand up against inequality, treat others with kindness, push for better systems. But on a personal level, when unfair things happen to you, don't let them poison you. If you believe the universe has singled you out for misery, you'll either grow bitter or give up trying. Instead, internalize that unfairness is a universal truth, not a personal vendetta against you. This mindset helped Priya, my friend who was laid off. After her initial grief, she realized her layoff wasn't a judgment of her worth, it was a business decision in a tough economy. She could either remain angry at the injustice or adapt. She ended up learning new skills and switching to a company that valued her more, a silver lining she wouldn't have seen if she'd stayed stuck on "it's not fair." Life will not hand each of us the same deck of cards. Some of us start with more advantages, some face more hardships. Justice is something we create among ourselves as a society, but the universe at large operates with a degree of randomness. Coming to terms with that by 30 is crucial. It will make you more resilient when life knocks you down for no apparent reason. When you hit a wall despite doing everything right, instead of throwing up your hands in despair, you'll be quicker to say, "Okay, that happened. What's next? How do I adapt?" It's like playing a game where the rules sometimes change mid-play. You can either keep complaining that it shouldn't be that way, or you learn the new rules and continue. To thrive, choose the latter. And remember, your idea of fairness might be limited. The job you didn't get might have gone to someone who truly needed it more for their family. You don't know. The breakup that feels so unfair now might free you to meet someone better for you. Life's twists and turns often reveal their purpose only in hindsight. So when unfairness strikes, feel the frustration, yes, but then remind yourself, this is a brutal truth of life. It doesn't mean I'm not worthy or that I should quit. It means I need to play the hand I'm dealt and keep moving. Over time, you'll find that this attitude turns despair into determination. You learn that life isn't fair, but you can still craft meaning and success within it by focusing on what's in your control: your effort, your mindset, your reactions. That is your unfair advantage in an unfair world. Of course, once you accept that life won't always reward you fairly, another fear rises to the surface. What if I try and still fail? That's where the next truth comes in. Truth number 4. Failure and rejection are not the end. They're the path to growth. At 27, Maria felt stuck. She had a decent job, but always dreamed of starting a podcast and blog about mental health. She had stories to share from her own struggles. For 2 years, she hesitated. Why? She was terrified of failing in public. What if nobody listens? What if people laugh at me? What if I mess up? Those what ifs paralyzed her. Meanwhile, her friend Devin, a software developer, had a different fear holding him back. He wanted to move abroad and work in another country, but he was afraid of the whole idea of failing, not finding a job, feeling lonely, maybe having to come back home with his tail between his legs. Both Maria and Devin were avoiding risks to avoid failure. By age 29, both of them faced a moment of truth. Maria, after yet another workday where she felt her soul was wilting, finally said, "Enough." Even if her podcast flopped, she couldn't live with the regret of not trying. She recorded her first shaky episode on her phone in a closet for soundproofing, voice trembling, and she published it. It got 30 plays in the first week, mostly friends, and one stranger who messaged her saying it really helped them. That one message lit Maria up. Devin's turning point came when an old college buddy who had moved abroad suddenly passed away in an accident. It was tragic, and it jolted Devin. Life was too short to not try. Within months, he packed his bags for Tokyo, job or no job.
The first year was hard. He did struggle. Odd jobs, language barriers, moments of crushing loneliness. But he didn't die of embarrassment like he'd imagined. In fact, he slowly built a new life, learning Japanese and eventually landing a solid job. Both Maria and Devin realized something by 30. The fear of failure is usually worse than failure itself. The brutal truth here is that you will fail, you will be rejected, and that's not just okay, it's necessary. By 30, if you've never failed at anything, it likely means you've been too safe. One person reflecting on their 30s put it perfectly. Not putting myself out there due to fear of failure was their biggest regret. They later learned that failing should be celebrated and encouraged as a tool to learn and grow. It might sound counterintuitive, celebrate failing, but yes, because failure is feedback. It's proof that you had the courage to try. Each stumble is a lesson in disguise, a scar that builds your wisdom. Think of toddlers learning to walk. They fall dozens of times, yet each fall actually teaches their muscles and brain how to balance better. We are no different as adults, except our falls are things like a business idea that flops, a job interview that goes nowhere, a relationship that doesn't work out, or an art piece that gets criticism. Each one can teach you something, if you're willing to learn. Rejection, similarly, is rough but informative. Maybe that company rejecting you pushes you to improve your skills or apply elsewhere you truly fit. Maybe that person who broke your heart taught you what you need or don't need in a partner. It's painful, yes. We won't pretend failure and rejection don't hurt. They do. But they don't mean you're not good enough or that it's time to give up. They mean you're growing beyond your comfort zone. We live in a time that paradoxically showcases perfection and encourages authenticity at the same time. Social media shows us the highlight reels. We'll talk more about that soon. So we often only see people's wins, not their countless losses behind the scenes. This can distort our perception. You might think you're the only one who's struggling, while everyone else seems to succeed effortlessly. It's not true. Behind every overnight success is usually a decade of failures and quiet persistence. Unfortunately, failures aren't often publicized. We also have a culture that can be harsh on failure in some ways. Employers sometimes question gaps or past missteps, and internet trolls gleefully pounce on others' mistakes. It can feel like you have to be perfect on the first try. But the trend is changing. Now, more people openly discuss mental health and the fact that life isn't a straight line upwards. Modern emotional solutions sometimes try to soften failure, like giving every kid a trophy or avoiding telling hard truths to spare feelings. While kindness is great, it's also important to know how to fail. Resilience isn't built by avoiding failure, it's built by falling and getting back up. What about serious failures, you might ask? Sometimes failure has big consequences, a bankruptcy, a divorce, a public embarrassment that truly impacts your life. It's true, some failures can't just be shrugged off in a day, but the principle remains. Those experiences hold lessons. Many successful entrepreneurs went bankrupt before figuring out their winning business. Many people find the right partner after a painful divorce, carrying forward lessons about themselves. Look at J.K. Rowling. She was a single mom on welfare when she wrote Harry Potter after numerous failures and rejections. She has spoken about how hitting rock bottom became the solid foundation on which she rebuilt her life. This isn't just motivational fluff, it's a pattern repeated in countless lives. The key is to learn and persevere. Failure truly becomes failure if it's the end of your story, not a chapter. If you learn and try again, perhaps in a new way, then it transforms into stepping stones. By 30, make peace with failure and rejection. Don't court them for fun, but don't fear them like the plague either. Fear of failure is more likely to stunt you than failure itself. It's like a cage that keeps you from even stepping onto the field. Would you rather not play at all and avoid failure, or play fully and sometimes lose? Life is a lot more interesting when you play. So start that project you've been afraid to start. Tell that person how you feel. Switch careers if your gut is pulling you, even if it means starting from scratch. You might fail, yes. You might hear no or not now, yes. But you will survive, and you will grow. Each time, it'll hurt a little less and empower you more. Think of each failure as a badge, not of shame, but of experience. As the saying goes, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. Embrace the storms and rough waters. They'll teach you how to navigate. When you look back at your 20s, it won't be your small failures you'll regret. You'll regret the chances you never took. So fail boldly and learn quickly. Over time, you'll realize that what you feared wasn't the fall itself, but the feeling of falling. And once you know you can get back up, that fear starts to shrink. That's when the horizon opens wide and almost anything becomes possible. But some of the deepest falls in life aren't about careers or projects at all. They're about people, about who walks with you and who quietly drifts away. That brings us to the next truth.
Truth number 5. Not everyone stays. Friendships and relationships evolve, and that's okay. Think of the friends who meant everything to you at 18. You swore you'd be inseparable forever. Fast forward a decade, how many of those people are still in your daily life? For many of us, this is a painful realization that hits by 30. I remember my buddy Alex, who had a tight-knit college crew. They did everything together in their early 20s. But then life happened. Careers took them to different cities. One got married, another had kids, others just drifted into new circles. At 31, Alex confessed to me that he felt incredibly lonely. His phone, once buzzing with group chat memes and weekend plans, had gone quiet. He hadn't spoken to his best friend from college in over a year. He said, "I feel like I lost something I thought was guaranteed." It wasn't due to a fight or drama. It was that subtle distance that grows when you're not paying attention. On the other hand, I have a colleague, Priya, who entered her 30s realizing she'd outgrown a few friendships that used to be close. One friend was deeply negative and often belittled Priya's ambitions. In her 20s, Priya put up with it. By 30, she decided her peace was too precious. They drifted apart, and though it was the right choice, it still hurt to let go of a longtime friend. Relationships in your life will change, and many won't last forever. This is a brutal truth that feels personal, but it's almost universal. A study suggests that after the age of 25, people tend to make fewer new friends, and friendships begin to fall away rapidly as the years go on. It's a natural part of life's transitions. People move, priorities shift, paths diverge. Yet when it happens to us, we often feel like we did something wrong or that we're alone in this experience. By 30, you might look around and find your circle smaller than it was at 20. The knee-jerk reaction is to mourn that or feel lonely, which is valid, but there's a silver lining. As one woman reflected, staying close requires dedication. You have to make time and effort to keep friendships alive. And because time is limited, throwback to truth number 2, you naturally start focusing on quality over quantity. In your teens and early 20s, having lots of friends feels like the mark of a rich social life. Later, you realize having a few true friends is far more meaningful. It's also true that some friendships are for a season, not a lifetime. And that's okay. Not every person who walks into your life is meant to walk with you till the end. Some will do a few chapters and then exit. Their impact, the memories, the lessons, can still be cherished without clinging to the entire relationship. Loneliness is an interesting puzzle in modern life. We're so connected digitally, yet many feel more isolated than ever. An APA poll in 2024 found that about 30% of young adults, 18 to 34, reported feeling lonely every day or at least several times a week. That's a huge number. One reason is that social media often gives us the illusion of connection. I know what my old friends are up to because I see their posts, but it's not the same as real interaction. It can actually hurt more to see an old friend's Instagram stories of a party you weren't invited to, or just to realize they seem fine without you. Our parents' generation didn't have to witness every acquaintance's gatherings in real time. They just drifted more quietly. We, on the other hand, might constantly be aware of what we're missing out on, which can exacerbate feelings of loss or FOMO, fear of missing out. Hustle culture and the busyness epidemic eat into time that used to be set aside for friendship. In your early 20s, you'd hang out after classes or dorm together. Friendship happened somewhat organically. In your late 20s, you might be working 10-hour days or juggling a family, and suddenly maintaining friendships requires deliberate effort, scheduling, and energy that you're already expending elsewhere. So what do we do with this truth? First, accept that it's normal. If you haven't talked to some close friends in a while, it doesn't automatically mean there's animosity or that you failed. It might just mean life is happening. That said, if the friendship truly matters, fight for it in whatever way you can. Dedicate time at least once a month to check in or meet up. Schedule that video call, send that silly meme. It matters. On the flip side, accept that some friendships will fade despite your best efforts. Instead of resenting it, you can honor what it was and allow each other to grow. Priya, who distanced herself from her negative friend, struggled with guilt, but she found peace by focusing on friends who were positive and supportive. Sometimes, creating space by letting go of one relationship allows new, healthier ones to form. By 30, many people also realize the importance of boundaries. You can love someone as a friend, yet set boundaries if they consistently drain you or disrespect you. It's not fun to do, but it's part of adulting in relationships. The emotional punch of this truth is realizing that a core part of your happiness, your connections, will shift in ways you might not expect. You might move to a new city and feel friendless for a while. You might be the only unmarried friend in your group and feel a distance as others pair off. Or you might be the one with kids noticing your child-free friends drifting because your lifestyles differ. It's all challenging, but it's also an opportunity. Each stage of life can bring new people who resonate with who you are now. Be open to that. Don't be so stuck mourning yesterday's friendships that you overlook today's potential friendships. And cherish the real ones, the friends and loved ones who stick around through life's changes. They are rare gems. To keep them, you'll need to put in effort too. That could mean planning a yearly trip with your old buddies no matter how busy life gets, or simply being the one to reach out and not always waiting for them. Yes, it stings when you realize you haven't heard from someone in ages, but if you miss them, shoot them a message. Maybe they've been buried in their own struggles and will be thrilled to reconnect. Also, remember that loneliness can be overcome. A shrinking circle doesn't doom you to isolation. It nudges you to seek community in new places. Maybe join a class, find a hobby group, lean into family, or strengthen one or two key friendships rather than scattering yourself thin. By embracing the ebb and flow of relationships, you'll navigate your 30s with less bitterness and more gratitude. You'll savor the memories of those who drifted away, and you'll deeply value those who remain by your side. After all, every person who walks with you, whether for a mile or a lifetime, contributes to your journey in some way. And your journey, ultimately, is uniquely yours. And in a world where our relationships, our milestones, and even our loneliness are constantly on display, there's another trap waiting for us: the habit of measuring our entire life against someone else's highlight reel.
Truth number 6. Stop comparing your life to others. Social media is a mirage. Every morning, Sam's alarm goes off, and within minutes, almost unconsciously, he's on his phone, scrolling Instagram. By the time he's brushed his teeth, he's seen a college acquaintance showing off a new house, a co-worker posting her sunrise yoga and green smoothie, and an old friend on a beach in Bali. Sam hasn't even had coffee yet, and already he feels behind. His studio apartment suddenly feels shabby. His ordinary toast breakfast seems pathetic compared to acai bowls and avocado toasts flooding his feed. One Saturday, Sam spends a quiet day doing chores and playing video games. It was relaxing until he checks his social apps that night. Apparently, half his network went to fancy brunches, parties, or had adorable family outings. He starts questioning his entire life. Am I doing this adulthood thing wrong? Why does everyone else seem to have it together and I'm just existing? What Sam doesn't realize is that for every person he envies, there's someone else envying him. His old friend in Bali, she's posting beautiful sunset pics, but she's also battling loneliness while traveling alone, something she'd never reveal online. The coworker with the yoga routine, she struggles with anxiety, and those serene posts are her way of trying to inspire herself as much as others. And that college acquaintance with the new house is secretly drowning in mortgage stress. Sam is comparing his behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, and it's a recipe for misery. We are comparing our lowest lows to others' highest highs. That quote captures it perfectly. Social media is a stage where most people project their best moments, achievements, and angles. It's not an accurate mirror of real life.
By 30, you need to know that comparison is the thief of joy, especially comparisons based on curated online lives. Studies consistently show that consuming others' highlight reels can trigger envy, anxiety, and depression. Why? Because it warps our benchmark for what a good life is. You start believing everyone else is happier, more successful, more attractive, more something than you. But consider, people usually post when they feel good, not when they're struggling. You see the promotion, not the nights they cried from stress. You see the cute couple selfie, not the argument they had earlier. Even beyond social media, comparing milestones, who's married or has kids by 30, who's climbing the career ladder, is a fast track to feeling inadequate. We each have different timelines and values. There is no universal deadline for when you should have achieved X or Y. Internalizing this truth means freeing yourself from an unwinnable race, because there will always be someone seemingly doing better than you in some aspect. If you constantly measure your worth against others, you'll never feel truly content. It's ironic, our era preaches be yourself and love yourself, yet the engines of our culture, especially online, constantly push us to compare and seek validation. Social apps use algorithms to show us the most engaging, often envy-inducing content first. It's by design. Envy and aspiration keep us hooked. Platforms highlight performative happiness, where people feel pressured to show their life in the best light possible. Even authenticity has become a kind of performance. We have filters to smooth our skin, clever captions to humble brag without seeming to, and selective camera angles to make our messy apartments look cozy. It's not all malicious fakery, it's human nature to want to put our best foot forward. But as consumers of this media, we must remember it's not the full truth. Think of social media like a movie trailer. It shows the snazziest parts, the drama, the laughter, set to uplifting music. It's not the full movie. Real life is the behind-the-scenes footage with all the cuts and bloopers. Another modern element is that we're no longer just comparing ourselves to the neighbors or colleagues we personally know. We're comparing to the entire world. By 30, you might be measuring yourself against global influencers, billionaires, or prodigies you read about. But comparing your career to, say, Mark Zuckerberg's, who was a billionaire by his mid-20s, is absurd and unfair to yourself. Yet, subconsciously, those extreme outliers can skew our sense of what success by 30 looks like. Some might say, but seeing others succeed motivates me. And yes, a little inspiration can be healthy. The issue is when inspiration slides into negative comparison. If seeing someone's fitness journey motivates you to get healthier, great. But if it just makes you hate your own body, that's destructive. It's a fine line, and you have to be honest about how certain content makes you feel. Others might argue that not comparing could lead to complacency, like if I don't measure myself against peers, won't I lack drive? The truth is, you can set goals and strive for improvement without using others as the measuring stick. Use your past self as the comparison instead. Am I a bit better, wiser, stronger than I was a year ago? If so, fantastic. If not, what can I do for me, not because someone else is ahead? Here's a liberating fact. There is no single right way to live a life, and it's not a competition. The only person you need to be better than is the person you were yesterday. When you catch yourself drifting into envy while scrolling, remember that you're often seeing edited, filtered highlights. As the Daily Trojan student newspaper noted, social media doesn't reflect reality. It's a masquerade of perfection. Try this practical step. Curate your feeds mercilessly. Mute or unfollow accounts that consistently make you feel like you're not enough, even if they're friends or family. You can support people in life without consuming every brag or posed photo that undermines your mental health. Fill your feed with people who are genuine or who share educational, funny, or uplifting content that doesn't provoke toxic comparison. More importantly, invest energy in your real life. The more satisfied you are with how you're spending your time and pursuing your values, the less you'll care about how others appear to be doing. If you find yourself constantly pained by what you see others doing, consider taking a social media break to reconnect with your own priorities. Focus on gratitude,
What do you have that you're thankful for? Often, envy blinds us to our own blessings. You may envy your friend's house, but maybe you have the freedom to travel that they lack. You may envy a certain relationship, not seeing your own fulfilling friendships. By 30, many have learned this the hard way. Chasing someone else's life is a race you can't win. Instead, define what success and happiness mean to you. Maybe your version of a great life at 30 is having a cozy apartment, a pet, and a stable job, even if you're not traveling the globe or making six figures like Person X, and that's perfectly fine. The moment you stop measuring your worth with someone else's ruler, you reclaim your peace. Life is not a highlight reel. It's a rich, messy, unique story. Embrace yours, and you'll find that comparison loses much of its grip, replaced by a quiet confidence that you're on the right path for you. But there's one comparison we almost always ignore, the comparison between who we say we want to be and how we actually treat ourselves every day. And that shows up most clearly in one place, our health.
Truth number 7. Your health and well-being are priceless. Don't sacrifice them for success. Danny was the poster child of hustle culture in his 20s. He prided himself on working 12-hour days at the startup, surviving on coffee and 4 hours of sleep. "I'll rest when I'm dead," he used to joke. Promotions came, money came, and with it, Danny's identity became completely tied to being the hardest worker in the room. But around 28, things started to crack. He developed chronic migraines and an ulcer from stress. He was irritable and exhausted, and his relationships tanked because he was never truly present, always glued to his laptop or phone. One night, after a minor mistake at work, Danny had what he later realized was a panic attack. He thought he was having a heart attack. That scare finally made him step back and see what he'd become. A bundle of nerves in an expensive suit with no life outside work and a body on the verge of breakdown. In a different scenario, there's Alicia. She spent her 20s partying hard every weekend. It was fun until it wasn't. By 29, she noticed she couldn't bounce back like before. The hangovers lasted days, and routine doctor visits showed warning signs: elevated blood pressure, early signs of fatty liver. Alicia realized she'd been treating her body like a rental car, assuming it would keep running regardless of abuse. For both Danny and Alicia, turning 30 was a wake-up call that health isn't a given, and that the habits of youth can come knocking with consequences. The brutal truth here is that your body and mind keep the score of how you live, and the bill always comes due. Many people in their 30s regret ignoring their health in their 20s. Neglecting exercise, skimping on sleep, surviving on junk food and alcohol, or pushing yourself to burnout, these choices compound over time. You might get away with it for a while. When you're 21, pulling an all-nighter and chugging energy drinks seems fine. But by 30, you often start feeling it. Maybe it's weight that suddenly won't drop off, or anxiety that worsened because you never addressed your mental health, or just a realization that you haven't felt genuinely good in a long time. Hustle culture sold us a lie that you should grind at the expense of everything: sleep, relationships, sanity, to achieve success. But what is success if you're too sick, depressed, or burned out to enjoy it? Burnout is not a badge of honor. It's a health crisis, and it's far more common than we admit. One survey found that a whopping 80% of millennials believe hustle culture leads to burnout or health issues. It's not just a personal issue, it's a generational one. The truth is, working smarter and taking care of yourself will get you further in the long run than working yourself into the ground. We have more knowledge now about wellness than ever. Fitness trackers, mindfulness apps, information on nutrition, yet many of us struggle to actually implement healthy habits. Modern life often pushes us in the opposite direction. Sedentary jobs, constant screen time, high stress, convenience foods, and the glorification of being busy all the time. Social media can also create pressure to look a certain way physically, which ironically can discourage people from starting their fitness journey out of shame or lead to unhealthy quick-fix diets. Mental health, thankfully, is talked about more openly now. But talking is one thing. doing the work, therapy, setting boundaries, etc., is another. Many young adults try to self-medicate stress with alcohol or ignore their emotional issues until they erupt. By 30, some have learned the hard way that ignoring mental health is as dangerous as ignoring physical health. Loneliness, anxiety, and depression can peak in late 20s, especially as we mentioned, friendships change and comparisons bite. Without healthy coping mechanisms, people either suffer in silence or break down. The modern workplace, especially in competitive fields, still often rewards overwork. If you're not careful, you can get caught in a cycle of proving yourself at the cost of your well-being, a cost that might only become evident later. Danny, from our story, did something unexpected. He actually negotiated a sabbatical from work to regroup. Turns out, even his company realized a burned-out employee wasn't ideal. He used that time to build healthier routines. He started therapy for his anxiety, learned meditation, and began treating sleep as sacred. Alicia drastically cut back on drinking and picked up jogging. A year later, she ran her first 10K and felt better at 31 than at 21. They both learned that taking care of yourself is not a selfish act, it's self-preservation, and it makes you better for everything else you want to do. Unless you have big goals, career, creative, or personal, you need a sound mind and body to achieve them. It's like maintaining a car. You wouldn't expect to finish a long road trip on tires with no tread or an engine that's never been serviced. Why expect to sustain a long, fruitful life on a body and mind that are perpetually mistreated? Before 30, in fact, at any age, but the sooner the better, carve this truth into your ethos. Health is wealth, truly. It's cliché, but ask anyone who has faced a serious health scare in their 30s how quickly priorities shift. Don't wait for a collapse or a diagnosis as your wake-up call. Start now with small steps. Maybe it's committing to a 30-minute walk each day, or finally seeing a therapist about that trauma or anxiety you've been carrying, or quitting smoking or vaping, or setting a rule to not check work emails after 8 p.m. so you can unwind. These are not soft choices, they are powerful ones. Because when you care for your body and mind, you're basically building the foundation for everything else. You'll have more energy, clarity, and longevity to pursue your dreams and take care of your loved ones. Success is hollow if you feel terrible inside. On the flip side, even if other parts of your life aren't perfect, maybe you're not where you wanted career-wise, or you're still searching for love, feeling healthy and balanced can give you a sense of confidence and peace that anchors you through those uncertainties. Also, consider the long game. Your 40s, 50s, and beyond will thank you for the habits you start before 30. The stretching you do now might save you from a bad back later. The mental health work you do now might mean you break generational cycles and become a more present parent or friend later. And if you've been in hustle overdrive, remember, rest is not wasted time. Taking a break can actually make you more productive and creative. The world is starting to realize this, hence movements against hustle culture and companies touting work-life balance. You're not lazy for resting, you're smart. In summary, take it from people who've been through it. Chasing money or career at the expense of health leads to regrets. Chasing external validation at the expense of inner well-being leads to emptiness. But investing in your health, physical, mental, emotional, pays dividends for life. By embracing this truth, you're not avoiding ambition. You're ensuring you'll be alive and well to enjoy the fruits of your ambition. And that is the ultimate win.